Most outdoor lawn supplies are made with harmful chemicals that put our health at risk, even as we aim for those luscious green gardens. Luckily, an alternative is on the market, letting consumers manicure their gardens without exposure to harmful chemicals.
You're listening to Found, TechCrunch's podcast that brings you the stories behind the startups. And today we're talking to Coulter Lewis from Sunday, a startup that makes lawn care treatments that are better for the planet. I'm Becca Skutak, and here with me is my fellow lawnless co-host,
Dominic Midori Davis. And of course, before we get into our conversation with Coulter, we have our 2 truths and a lie. And after the conversation, we'll tell you which one of these statements isn't true. All right, so listen carefully. Which one of these is a lie? Is it that Coulter's background in horticulture inspired the company? That Sunday launched in retail stores because stores approach them? Or that the company has developed the largest soil database in the nation?
Wow. Listeners, you will have to listen through the episode to find out which ones are true and which one is the lie. But before we dive into the conversation with Coulter, a quick reminder to rate and review the show. You can do so wherever you are already listening to this Found episode. We would greatly appreciate it. And without further ado, let's chat with Coulter. Hey Coulter, how's it going?
Doing great. Excited to chat today, Becca.
Yeah, excited to chat as well. And before we dive into Sunday, I do have to bug you about one thing, knowing that you're based in Colorado. And as someone who is a Denver Nuggets fan, how are you feeling after this week?
I'm so not dialed into it, I'll be honest, but the company is in depression, I'll say. There's been a lot of chatter on our daily stand-up about this. And a lot of pain, but I'm avoiding that, I guess.
Well, that is good news for you. Bad news for me. But now, look, switching gears back to Sunday, why don't we start there? Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about the company?
Sure. As you mentioned, we're based in Boulder, Colorado, but we have teams all over the country. But what Sunday is setting out to do is really reinvent how people care for their property. So when you think about outdoor home, it turns out that our yards are actually the 3rd largest crop in the U.S., and caring for them is really complex and really challenging and really toxic the way we do it now. So Sunday is bringing technology to this space to empower people, make it easy to care for your yard, your lawn, your garden, pest control, all these kinds of things, outdoor home, in a way that's better for the environment and really easy for you.
And that's so interesting to think about because, like you said, a lot of people have yards, grass, and things like that are such a big part of like the overall crop demographic in the US. And yet people don't generally talk about this category very often. How did you get interested in sort of building better lawn care to begin with?
Yeah, I didn't expect to be here. I think it's something that, like a lot of ideas, I, through kind of circuitous route, was drawn to it. And then once you start seeing a problem that's this big, I had to do it. I had to fix it, right? Or do my best to anyway. This really started with my wife and I started a business called Quinn Snacks together. So Quinn is like a natural food brand you'll find in pretty much every grocery store in the country. But we built that just brick by brick over 10 years. And what that company ended up becoming was really a company about ingredients, how they're grown, what the impact is on that land, on that farmer, on our customers. And so I grew up in the Northeast. I had no exposure to agriculture growing up, and suddenly I'm in field with growers and farmers, immersed in that world, and it's beautiful. And it's amazing to see just the knowledge they bring to bear and how the relationship they have with that land. And then I bought a house. I've got 3 boys and a dog, and I had a little yard of my own. Really little, but still for me, it was a piece of the earth. And I, had that frame of reference. I'd just been in these farms when I was standing in an aisle at a store looking at the shelf and smelling the shelf and thinking, this feels really wrong. It feels like something needs to change here. And so, that just kind of started a cascade of digging in and learning more and more about it and just figuring out all of the areas in which it really needed to be changed.
And I know you guys offer a subscription model, and you guys generally got started as a DTC company. So I'm curious how you got to that point after you're looking in the aisle of lawn care products, you're standing there physically in the store.
Yep.
Coming to this realization that you want to make something better. What was the journey like actually building that out and sort of making the choices to launch it as DTC and to make it that subscription model? Like, walk us through what got you there.
Yeah, well, I will make an assumption that this was like a business model decision that was made, and then we tried to fit the offering into that business model. But it was the other way around. Like what we actually ended up doing is, so looking at the space and learning about it, it's absolutely massive. Most households take part in this. It's a $100 billion industry on DIY, way bigger than like cosmetics, even footwear. Like it's just huge. But there's kind of one old school brand selling really poisonous stuff. In fact, you've got Roundup that is facing a $10 billion settlement because it causes cancer. It's the most popular product in the category, but it's also under this massive cancer litigation. It's like stranger than fiction type stuff. And so the immediate impulse was, I want to fix the ingredient side of this. I want to come to this market with better inputs, better ingredients, and better branding and positioning. And that's a force that's changed a lot of markets. I mean, every single category, pretty much that was the recipe that created a whole watershed of change. But what we did, and my background is in design and a lot of ethnographic research, is we spent a year talking to people. We gave them products. We worked with them through a full season at their home and interviewed them in person for hours and things like this. And we learned that no one knows anything about lawn and garden care. That's generalizations, but it's 98% true. People are generally at the stage of I kill houseplants. So they have that level of confidence, yet they've got a piece of the earth to care for, and they feel that overwhelmed by it. And so that's what ended up driving us to the subscription model was okay, actually, better ingredients and, more approachable branding, that's all good stuff, but people need help. And they need a solution, not just a bunch of products. And so that really is what formed the subscription model and this idea of let's give them everything they need and make this as easy as possible to do it the right way. And that led to a subscription.
So what was the first product that you released?
So the first thing we made was fertilizer for lawn care. So lawn is the category we started with. And really, there's a lot of reasons for that. One, it's a really good beachhead because it's a massive market. The other is our approach is very complex technologically. We have to analyze people's property, in real time when they're ordering, and then throughout their subscription, and constantly shift and update based on weather conditions, all those sorts of things. And it's easier to model that for lawn, to be totally transparent, because it's one species and you can kind of better understand how it's going to respond to conditions. So that's where we started. And essentially what a customer was buying is they would go to our website, put their home address in, we analyze their property, soil conditions, climate, size, all these kinds of things, and then give them a custom nutrient plan so that they get the exact right amount of nutrients at the right time to match what that lawn needs. I know it's not very exciting sounding, but the end result for the end user is this thing that I was really intimidated by. All of a sudden, actually, I can do it. It was all way too complex for me, but now I've got a plan I can follow. And then on the other side of it, on the impact side, we use maybe a third of the inputs on the fertilizer side and about 90% fewer pesticides. And yet people still get the outcome they want, still have a great looking yard. So that was the original offering, was in lawn care.
No, because it's really, really fascinating. So did you go to people's lawns or did they send you the soil samples?
So the way it works, and this is still how it works today, is we do an upfront analysis, and that's based on 30-year historical climate data, real-time weather, aerial imagery, then also all the soil tests that we've now accumulated. We probably have a lot of your neighbor's dirt already, so we can use that to estimate what's going on in your yard. And then our customers can send in a soil sample back to us, and that will then further kind of refine their plan. And this really, again, it's inspired by seeing how farmers manage their land and how the relationship they have. They have all of this data to be able to continually adapt and have this relationship to meet needs where they are and not overdo it. So that's the kind of precision approach that we have.
And I don't want to say this is a ridiculous question, but I'm just really nosy now.
Yeah.
So what is the differences in the type of soil? Because I'm sure soil in Florida is different from soil in California. And
oh, yeah.
So what's kind of the differences there?
In that example, one of the major differences would be organic matter. So when we talk about carbon being stored in the soil and how soil is the key to reversing climate change and all these sorts of things, it's really around organic matter, which is carbon that's been put into the soil by plants. In Florida, that's typically really low, and it's a lot of sand. And so that grass will need more nutrients. It's got less to rely on. The soil's less rich. So that'd be one example, the organic matter. But we also measure different nutrients from macro to micronutrients. And we'll only send, let's say, something like phosphorus if we see there's a deficiency. Otherwise, it's just something that we don't need to put on there, and it's going to pollute waterways. It's not a positive thing. So we only are kind of meeting the needs of where there are deficiencies in the soil.
No, that is so interesting because I'm asking this fully based on my own yard. I'm doing air quotes, listeners, situation. Do you ever get soil samples from people and you're just yeah, you just cannot grow anything here? We're super fun site adjacent. So I'm I think our soil is literally radioactive. Does that ever happen?
We don't test for radioactivity. Maybe we should. I'm afraid of what we'd find. To be honest, the soil component of it, I think people kind of want to hear, oh, there's something really broken here that, we have a quick fix to. A lot of times it's in decent shape and there's maybe little issues here or there. But generally speaking, in the U.S., broadly speaking, and also just in yards, because they kind of generate good soil, there's a good base to work from. It's not a lost cause, I promise, Becca.
Oh my God. Well, I was hoping it was based on how my gardening has gone the last few years, but that is okay. I do want to ask, because I'm always curious when we have companies on the show who are looking to kind of innovate these big, long existing categories with more natural ingredients, just a better for you approach. How difficult was it to kind of design these different formulas and find these
not as toxic, not as harmful chemicals to kind of replace what everyone was already using. Was that like a hard process, or was it maybe people just weren't thinking about it or looking into it prior, and that's why it didn't exist?
No, I think it was harder than I knew getting into it. Maybe that lack of understanding of how difficult it's going to be helps you kind of go forward sometimes. I spent the early period really trying to learn about, and this was at the time just fertilizer. Now we've got 75 products against all different categories. It's gotten a lot more complex, but at that time it was just fertilizer, trying to learn everything I could, mixing stuff in my garage, which is super illegal and not not okay, but really just trying to figure out how you put things into solution, what are the kind of key components that will make for a really successful product that actually makes things grow while not poisoning the environment. And I got in over my head. I mean, fully. Like I thought I could figure this out just by geeking out over it. I ended up writing a guy named Frank Rossi, who's a turf PhD at Cornell, and just saying, I've got this idea and I really could use some help. And amazingly, I got him to fly out and then become a part of the company and really, really help bring all of that university research and knowledge to bear here. And when I started to see what that looked like and what real depth of knowledge was here, I was like, okay, I was nowhere near figuring this out on my own. But I think you just kind of take one step forward and just keep going forward, and unlocks like that happen. But it is fairly complex. Yeah.
And what was it like actually starting the company? Because I know DTC was this huge wave, especially back in 2012 and that time period. And by the time you guys launched, it had kind of already reached the peak and gone down.
Oh, yeah.
And you definitely weren't hearing as much about DTC companies in 2018 because a lot of them just did not really pan out the way investors especially thought they were going to. So what was it like launching this kind of a strategy at that time? What do you think has made this DTC company? I know you guys have since expanded to retail stores, but how did you guys make DTC work at a time when a lot of people just weren't as interested in it?
Yeah, I think what I'll say to listeners, for sure, is just around, at that time, DTC was deeply uncool in the world of VC. And trends are exaggerated in that space, right? And so that is a serious headwind to come up against. And even if you have a different approach and it's fundamentally not the same as what they're benchmarking off of, it's still a headwind. So we had to face that. And there was kind of just a thoughts out of a mindset. Sometimes people talk to me oh, we're kind of not doing that right now. That's not even in the field of view. So, I think what we were able to get through with that is, for one, our first seed investor there, we did kind of some pre-seed stuff with really fantastic people, but then the first kind of substantial investment was from Forerunner, and they really understand the space and immediately understood what made Sunday different in the space and how our model was different. I think that helped get us some momentum. But fundamentally, my point of view on this was a lot of DTC brands in the past were saying it's just like what you get in a store, except you don't have to go to the store.
Right.
I was like, that is not a value prop. Skipping the trip to the store is something that Amazon is absolutely nailed. And you've got to be able to do something that is well beyond that in terms of providing value to the customer. And I think we saw that bear out, right? And so Sunday Solution is really around the reason why you buy from us. We consider going to our website and purchasing a huge inconvenience. That's not a treat for people. That's like running a mile. That is going out of your way to go to some other website and buy a thing. But the reason you'll do it for Sunday is that we know your yard, and we're going to make this thing that you're not good at. We're going to help you be good at it. We're going to sell you a solution, not just some product. So that's what was fundamentally different about it, and why we've been able to scale in a much more challenging D2C environment.
When did you know it was time to expand into brick and mortar, and also why?
So I actually thought that would happen much later in our lifespans as a business. And what ended up happening is the brick and mortar came to us. And I wasn't used to that. So, 10 years of building Quinn Snacks, I was always on the wrong side of the table there and just kind of begging for a spot on the shelf, and then getting the bottom slot in the shelf, and then having to fight your way up, piece by piece, which is incredibly difficult when there isn't that investment from the retailer. And then, that obviously, as Quinn built a household name, that changed. But for Sunday, what happened was that the space has had so little activity, and really our ability to engage the next generation of homeowner is exactly what retailers need. And it's really, really challenging for them to be able to get that new person in that part of the store. So there was a shared need there, and that made things really work. And it made us able to have retailers make a bigger investment in us, and not just give us one slot on the shelf and see how it goes, but actually really push for Sunday and make sure that we have some visibility and awareness in the store. And so that's when you have that opportunity, you kind of have to take it. And so we're very lucky with that.
Yeah, because I was going to ask, and I don't know if it's the same with, let me just say that I live in New York. I don't have a lawn.
It's all good.
But I remember growing up in Florida, my grandparents, my parents, a big Sunday thing was going to Home Depot and stuff,
Oh, yeah.
and Lowe's. And it was lawn shopping was a very intense experience. Like you had to like touch the soils, you had to like do it, like know all of these things. And so I was wondering, like in the beginning DTC days, how did consumers kind of respond to doing everything online? Like, do lawn shopper, I don't know what to call them, lawn shoppers, is that like a really intimate experience for them when they're buying these type of things? And how did they initially react to doing it all online?
I think there's different types of customers in the space. And I mean, just to speak about what you're saying here, like people going to Home Depot on a Sunday and this being kind of part of their routine. Home Depot does $24 billion a year in lawn and garden. Like that's bigger than the entire cosmetics industry in the US, just through Home Depot. So this is a well-trodden tradition. And it's beautiful. I actually, that's why we named it Sunday, was this idea that people are going out and caring for their little piece of the earth every weekend. Like that's an amazing thing. And I want to be a part of that. So love that you had that experience. And yeah, it is for a lot of people, especially when you're shopping for plants and live goods and things like that, really being able to see them and get excited about it is a key part of it. The customers that we're attracting, I think it's the biggest segment of the market, which is like, I should be doing this. I should be doing more, but I don't know how. And this is really intimidating. And maybe I'll just hire a pro because I just don't think I can do this. So we're less trying to capture that person who already is doing that behavior and going to Home Depot every weekend and really familiar with it and excited about that trip, and more trying to capture the bigger group of people who are less active in the space and know they should do more, but just kind of need to be empowered to be able to take that step.
I love a trip to Home Depot, I will be honest. But I'm curious, how does it work with these products being in the retail store, especially with your sort of D2C approach where it's like a subscription model and people get sort of that extra layer where you analyze their actual lawn? Like, what parts of that translate over to the retail model, and sort of how have you had to approach that side a little bit differently?
Yeah, and that's something we thought a lot about. And I would say we're continually getting better at bringing like what makes Sunday special to the retail shelf. What we do right now is we use that soil database we have. So about 250,000 soil data points across the US. And so pretty much within a couple hundred yards of anywhere, we kind of have a sample and we have a sense of regionally what soil profiles look like. And there's pretty drastic differences across the US. So we make products that are specific to regions based on that knowledge and that data. And so it is not as specific as your yard as we do on D2C side of the business, but it is much more specific than kind of the brute force approach that you typically find on shelf. The hope there is not only is the formula better suited to that environment, but also for the person who's on the shelf looking at that shelf being like, what do I get? There's so many options here. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. Having something that's specific to their region helps make it more approachable and build some confidence in them. So that's been our approach in retail, and that's gone well, but we're continually evolving that.
And I know you guys have expanded, and you mentioned, since that first product, just focusing on the lawn care side of it. And how do you guys think about expansion in that way? And I think the last time we spoke, you guys were just getting into sort of like pest control, or I don't even know if you had even launched it yet, but why did that make sense as the next step? And then garden, and how do you guys think about expanding in that way?
Garden was what I wanted to do when we started Sunday. That was really exciting to me. The idea of getting someone outside and having that passion and growing new things and growing food, like all of that is really beautiful and something I want to be a part of. But we knew that it wasn't the right category to start the business in. It just wasn't going to be the right footing for us to go into this market. And just to give some context there, like this is a category with a massive player who's controlled the market for half a century. And so if you can't boost into it, like, there's been very, very few companies that have been able to actually create some presence here. And so, yeah, for me, it's so exciting to finally be at the scale and maturity where we're able to really push further into these new categories of garden and also pest control and do them in a better way. So, in terms of why it makes sense for Sunday and what our approach is there, and this is all things we're developing, but when we think about outdoor home, those are the biggest categories people are in activities they're engaged in. And the level of confidence people have and know-how is generally like near zero, right? And really like they would do a lot more if they knew how. And I think that's especially true in gardening. And a lot of people are held back from this thing that is kind of really fundamental and really rewarding because they're like, no, I'm going to screw it up. It's too complicated. And so the idea of Sunday being able to create an experience around that and be the expert for you and help you do this thing is just exactly what we want to do. And we finally have the capacity from a tech perspective to start building that. So that's the exciting next phase for us.
Wait, I need to know more about this pest control now. So what was the research like, or like, what was it like doing the research on pest control? Was there something you found out about pests that maybe you didn't know before? Like, what's the drama with pest control? Because pests are scary.
Yeah, they are scary. I mean, I think, a lot of this is also when you think about companies like Terminix and these kind of multi-billion-dollar companies that come to your house for 6 minutes, spray around your property and walk and go away. The only reason they're able to create that much monetary value is because people are like intimidated by this process. They don't know how to do it themselves. And so the idea, again, is to empower them to say, like, that thing he's doing for 7 minutes, you could do it for 7 minutes, and it'll cost a lot less. And you could do it in a way it's much more natural. And so a lot on the pest side went into the formulas and trying to figure out how we do create something that's really effective, but at the same time not as toxic as the synthetics that are typically used and things you really don't want around your kids and pets. One ingredient that's really kind of fun is this one called pyrethrin, which is an extract of the chrysanthemum flower. So literally an extract of a flower. It is one of the most powerful insecticides you can find. It's expensive, right? It's an organic input, but it has that, directly derived from a living thing, but at the same time, incredibly effective. I mean, like within seconds. So those are the kind of things we want to bring to market and make available to people.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask that, like, how do you create a strong pest? Because I know when I'm thinking pest, I'm like, I want the strongest chemical right now to just zap you off the earth. But I also want to be able to breathe while doing so. So it's like that balance, finding that
A little
balance.
bit of a balance. Yeah, kill them, not me type thing. I would say, from building a natural brand, I kind of learned some of this the hard way and some core tenets here. I spent a lot of time years ago handing out samples in Whole Foods of products we were making at Quinn Snacks and just really seeing very viscerally, like, okay, it's great that we have this amazing supply chain, really proud of our growers and farmers, but if it doesn't taste good, none of that matters. We've got to hit the fundamental need of that customer in that moment. It's got to be amazing, right? And then also the same thing in pest control. Like if we can't really control the problem, if we can't make it so that they wish they'd bought something that was, more toxic, like we lost. So yeah, fundamentally, like across all of Sunday, even though we're taking a more natural approach, it has to work no matter what. If lawns don't look better, if pests aren't dead, if your garden didn't grow bigger than you thought it would, like we're out of business.
I definitely want to switch gears into chatting more about building the company and your journey as an entrepreneur. But I did want to ask, because you've brought up a few times this data you guys have collected on soil samples from across the country and this whole database you have of all this information. Have you ever thought about building something on top of that? Like, you gave anybody access to that? Like, of course, privacy stuff comes into play here, but that seems like such like a treasure chest of information. Like, have you guys ever thought of building something on it?
I mean, we're really focused on building customer-facing features, ways to leverage all of that data so that someone can feel like an expert and know exactly what to do and when and go outside and do more things, right, in their property. So we have not entertained the idea of giving other people access to that data, and I think that's probably not in line with just kind of how we operate. But I think we're going to drive a ton of value, and we already have, but we'll continue to drive more and more value from that. In terms of what puts us in the position to be the expert for you and help you along, like this rich data is part of it. The other part is the input we get from our customers. What's really different about Sunday is when you go to your home improvement store and you check out, they're like, good luck with that, peace, and that's the end of that relationship. Whereas we're on the hook. I mean, you've signed up with us and we're promising you a good outcome and we're going to help you through this full season. So we get lots of conversation and kind of this active relationship with our customers. And all of that input helps us to calibrate and get better and know you better and be able to better empower you. So I would say one of our best sources of data is the customer themselves.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, switching gears a little bit, because I definitely want to talk about you as a founder, because obviously, as you've mentioned a couple times on this call, this was not your first startup. And there are definitely overlapping themes between Quinn Snacks and Sunday. But at the end of the day, I don't eat lawn care and you don't put snacks on your lawn. So I am curious, sort of thinking about the two companies, what things did you learn building Quinn Snacks that you were like, yep, that worked well, I'm definitely implementing that second time around? And sort of what things where you're like, I might try to approach this differently this time. That didn't always work super well.
Sure. I just thinking back on the timeline all the way to the beginning, I think what Quinn Snacks helped me see was like what's possible and just knowing it's there and just keep going sometimes, right? When we first started Quinn, we were on this mission to solve, this very particular problem in snacks and kind of invent a new way of doing something. And it felt impossible. And I think that impossibility actually gave us this shield of protection to not be too afraid of what it was going to become and how much challenge is ahead of us. And so we just so my wife and I founded the business together and built it together. And so we kept taking steps forward and expecting to find some sort of brick wall and some sort of ending. that was like, oh, you know what, this registration or this, this sort of thing, we can't do that. And I think believing that might be ahead of us actually was a bit of a relief, but it turned out we just kept going, right? And we every time we rounded a corner, we just kept going forward. And, before we know it, we're on shelf. Before we know it, we're in a region of Whole Foods, and, just incrementally kept building the business with so many unanswered questions ahead of us always. And getting comfort with that and recognizing that eventually you will answer those things, even if you can't today. And so certainly in Sunday early on, like there was so many unknowns and so much of this that was scary as hell. And you had to just keep going and know that you're going to find that answer if you just keep going, things will illuminate and you'll find answers as you go. So I had more confidence that it's there and just keep going, right? For having gone through Quinn. And then I could talk kind of more tactically about some pieces of it too, and how we built the businesses and how they differ too. Definitely a different trajectory overall. Quinn was much more brick by brick, kind of one piece at a time and just continually building. And that's entirely different from how Sunday was built, which was much more rapid. We scaled into the category over 3 years very, very rapidly and really had the resources to be able to put growth first. And that was, I think, a benefit and a need in this category in terms of establishing ourselves in a category where there really hasn't been, again, any new players. So that was an entirely new experience for me, but it felt like what this market needed was a more rapid approach. So that was one kind of fundamental difference. How we funded the businesses are different too, where Quinn was funded much more in the CPG kind of funding landscape, and really amazing people there, but a different kind of funding environment than a lot of what is funded Sunday, which is more kind of Silicon Valley and New York VC style funding. So that was a new experience for me and different. Then there's a team building component, which is kind of everything. and there's a lot that for me, that's a continuous journey of just building my capability there, recognizing that it takes a lot of work and a lot of focus and a lot of reflection and just continuous iteration to get better and better at that. So I'm certainly more developed in that than I was at Quinn, but I'm still building it. One thing I did at Sunday is just surround me with people that were, instead of kind of like imagining that I was going to enjoy every part of the business and thinking I was good at all of it, I'm very, very aware of the things that I'm not good at now. It's been proven to me so many times that I can't deny it anymore. And the areas where I'm just so thrilled to have someone who's way better than me around me. And so I built just an incredibly capable team at Sunday, which was crucial. So yeah, there's some differences.
Yeah, and kind of on that, what has it been like building two companies with family members? And how is that?
It's been great. But I have some advice, I would say, on that one. I think starting a business with your spouse and significant other can be really challenging. And I certainly heard some horror stories there. We were able to do it successfully, but we also learned early on that we had to have a clear delineation of what our responsibilities were and where we had the final say. I know that sounds pretty basic, but it's easy to say, no, we'll just kind of work it out. The reality is you have to have a clear agreement so that when someone says, hey, I don't really like how you're doing this, you can say, I hear you, I appreciate the feedback, but this is how we're doing this, and you can actually have a final say in your category. That was a kind of a crucial pivot for my wife and I to be able to make that work. And then at Sunday, it's my brother leads our R&D team and all the product development, and he's incredibly talented at that. We've launched 75 SKUs in a handful of years. So we have 5,000 registrations across the US, which is really complex. I can get into that later. But for me, that was always a dream to be able to work with him. And so I just feel lucky that we kind of each found our spot in the business where we can really excel.
Wow. Two family-run businesses that sound like very drama-free. That is quite the feat.
It's not always drama-free, but we figure it out.
No, I love that. More from this conversation right after a quick break. I know you talked a little bit about sort of building your team and things like that, but same with a lot of different startups tackling these kind of categories where it really just no one's really working in here. Like there aren't a ton of people trying to build more sustainable lawn care. What was it like hiring for this company? Did you find people who were passionate about this issue like you guys were? People who were like, oh, well, I want to work here because I've been looking for something like this for the X amount of years I've owned a home. What was it like hiring for this type of a business?
It's funny, Dom. I think of most of the interviews I have, people say something similar where they're kind of like, I got to admit, I don't have a yard and I really don't know a lot about this. And they kind of think that's something that they will put them down in the stack or make it less likely to be hired. And that's not the case at all. I think a lot of people who work at Sunday are in that position. We're not looking for lawn care experts. In fact, not being one is probably a much better thing. What does tie us together as a team, though, is the mission on the environmental and empowering people side. The things we're doing, the impact we have on people's lives and on the environment is a crucial, critical, central theme that we kind of continually talk about as a business. And I think it does bring really amazing talent to Sunday and helps them stay here. So that's central. Yeah.
And one other thing I did want to ask you about was sort of the pandemic. Because I know, and this would have been a factor, listeners, if you don't know, we last spoke in 2021 regarding your last Series C round. So that was definitely like in the throes of the pandemic still. But so many people left cities, so many people moved to more suburban areas, people bought houses. Was this one of those businesses that was able to kind of ride the pandemic wave in a maybe, I don't want to say an unexpected way, because if you think about it, you're like, well, that makes sense. But there are definitely certain industries like healthcare and stuff where it's like, obviously they're having a huge impact because of the pandemic. But what was that like for you guys?
Yeah, it certainly was a tailwind for our industry as a whole. I remember early days, and my head of CS, who's just an amazing part of Sunday, said, "Can I talk to you for a second? People aren't going to care about this if we're fighting, really, really worried about what this would mean and how it would probably hobble our ability to really grow, and we're going to fight through this thing." And I think like a lot of businesses, we saw that switch pretty quickly. We're looking for things that were fundamental and felt good. And like these kinds of, I think we fit the bill exactly for all of the tension and all the anxiety. Like, let's go out and just care for your yard and your property. Like, that feels great. So that certainly was a tailwind for Sunday and the industry overall. I don't think we were developed enough to fully take advantage of that tailwind, I'll say. We didn't have all of the learnings, know-how, team, products, categories, all the things that we could have really exploded probably during that time. But that's probably a good thing. If we had done that and really leaned into that moment too far, then we would have found ourselves in a much more difficult spot afterwards. Whereas we've never not grown. We almost 2x'd a year after the pandemic. So, we've been able to grow through that and not kind of over leverage ourselves during that period, which was a challenging spot. I mean, I don't think I was smart enough to see that. I think we just happened to not be good enough to do it at the moment.
Just a follow-up to kind of your hiring question. I wanted to know, like, who is the first person you hire for a company like this? Because I was thinking, like, I mean, you said not like lawn care experts, because I was going to say, is it like a soil expert? Like, who is the first person that you hire?
Yeah. So Frank Ross, who I had discussed, wasn't, payroll hire. He was an advisor to us. So that's kind of the first maybe professional we brought in. And that was the core knowledge of the space and the science of it. The first employee was an ops leader. And that was really around me recognizing where I'm not strong. And also having been in a situation to see when ops is not working well, what that does to a business and how that can just hobble growth for years. And so I really had a mindset going to this, like, we're going to have ops and finance dialed. And so we started there. I started with an amazing person who was kind of like a fundamental first principle thinker and operational leader who was able to do a lot more than just supply chain, really get the business on its feet, cover for those core gaps that I have. And I think that's really important, especially early on when the teams are very, very small. You have to understand where you're not going to be able to deliver, where you can't go fast, and get people in those spots who can do it.
And right now you're only in the US, right?
Correct.
Because I was wondering, we always talk to people who have so much drama expanding companies like this overseas, because everyone, I guess, has different laws about stuff like this.
Oh, yeah.
Have you looked at expanding into like Canada or, Mexico and Europe? Because I imagine it's going to be like so much, I guess there's regulation, I'm imagining, over soil and stuff.
It's actually probably the worst in the US and most challenging. So we have to register every product in every single state, and often with the EPA and others too. So, again, it's like 5,000 registrations. Those are all active, complex individual registrations that we had to work through. So it's very, very regulated in the US. And that's not something we knew getting into this, that we have to be good at that. Like, one of our core capabilities had to be managing that landscape. And that's what enables innovation in the space. So that was something we didn't know. I will say Canada's an interesting one in that most of the products you find on shelf in the US are not legal there. And basically their Cancer Society and Children's Society, Pediatric Society got together and said, let's look at this. Are these things dangerous? Okay, evidence is pointing to absolutely. And, polluting waterways, these sort of things. And what's the upside? The upside's fewer dandelions. That's nuts. So they instituted a pretty much countrywide ban on what they call cosmetic pesticides. So whenever you're using something just for cosmetic purposes, that's potentially dangerous. Of course, all of Sunday products are allowed there. We don't sell things that would be on that list. But it just goes to show kind of how off base our approach might be here.
That doesn't even surprise me given how the beauty industry also is regulated.
Yeah.
I imagine, oh my gosh, now I need to know what the EU would say about our soil. Like it'd probably just like immediate ban.
I'd be
Like, don't-
horrified.
It would be horrifying.
My backyard would kill a European.
Yes.
There's a lot in the EU that is not allowed that is allowed here too, as you would expect. But again, I mean, like our approach, we're 100% in line with the values and regulations in those countries. So we would have no limitations in the products that we sell. You know, when we think about expansion, there's so much in the US for us, and there's so much we want to be able to do to be a complete solution for people rather than just simply one or another part of their outdoor home care. So I really want to prioritize getting that right and figuring that out first.
No, and that leads perfectly into our last question, because we're pretty much right about at time. What's next for you guys? You guys have done these product expansions. You've been around for a handful of years now. Where do you guys head from here? And like, what are you excited about down the road?
We're going so fast right now. It's so exciting. The team continually changes over time. The executive team I have now is so talented, and it has helped make Sunday run so much more quickly and innovate faster and get things to market faster. So I'm like, this is a heyday and I'm really excited about it. And what that will look like to our customers, to the world, is really like having more and more help here, more and more digital tools and products and resources to like be good at this part of your life. So especially in garden is going to be one of the crucial areas there where it'd be really cool to grow a vegetable garden. Like we're going to take that sentiment to like, I'm doing it this year and making it possible and making it easy for that person to go and to do this and do it in a way that's, again, obviously better for them and for the environment. So yeah, outdoor home care empowered by Sunday is where we're going and going fast.
Perfect. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I will admit, this whole conversation in the back of my mind, I was like, I wasn't going to do any gardening this year because I've been very discouraged, but I think I'm going to buy some stuff. So thank you for coming on the show.
Keep at it. You've got this. And Sunday's going to have a lot of tools to help you out soon. So excited for that.
Perfect.
And that was our conversation with Coulter. Dom, what did you think?
I really liked the conversation. But wait, first, we have to do our 2 truths and a lie.
Oh, of course.
Okay, so what was the lie? The lie was that his background in horticulture inspired the company. It wasn't that. It was actually when he had his past company and they were out in the fields working with organic farmers.
Oh, yeah. He was surprised that, like, why can the farms use this organic stuff and we can't? Which is so interesting to think of, like, that's how he backed into this idea.
I know. He was like, I'm so mad about not having access to organic farm materials. I'm going to create organic farm materials.
For the love.
Which is a type of pettiness that I would do. I would do that too, honestly.
Yeah, because, like, having, like, an organic snack food company, you wouldn't. Sure, they share the, like, better for you, better for the planet thread, but, like, having a natural food company is not, like, a gateway to having a lawn care company.
I know. And I know Big Lawn was shook when this guy started paying attention, because it wouldn't surprise me if America was just mixing bleach and putting it into a bottle and selling it to us, because we just sell anything on the market. And so knowing that someone was like, hey, let's actually pay attention to all this stuff that we're putting on our lawns and then inhaling, you know, I like the product. I don't have a lawn, but if I had a lawn, I would look at it.
No, I think it's a great idea. And I know that lawns, really, there's so many chemicals. Like, I remember being a kid and it'd be like, every so often, it'd be like, okay, blah, 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 treatment's going on the lawn. You kids can't play on it until tomorrow, or you like can't touch it till it rains, or like all these different things. And then you think about it and it's like, well, why can't we touch it? Maybe we should unpack that for a second.
I know. I remember like, when there used to be like a bug in the house or something and they would get the raid or whatever, and then my grandparents would be like, okay, I just sprayed the house down. You can't be in it or something, or like open the windows. We don't know what's going to happen to your lungs. And I would always say, oh, that sucks. I want to take a nap.
No, I know. It's funny when he had talked about, we were talking about like Home Depot with him, and he had been like, if you think about it, you can smell the lawn care aisle. When my boyfriend got home, later in the day, I asked him that. I was like, if you could think about it, like, do you think you could smell the lawn care aisle at Home Depot if you thought about it? And he was like, I know exactly the smell. And then we went to Home Depot literally last weekend, and it was like, we weren't buying any of that kind of stuff, but it's just like the smell.
Fact that that's
we just
the
like,
smell.
we're like,
I thought that was just grass. I thought that's how grass smelled, but now I look back and it was like, oh, that probably was just chemicals. I've never like personally smelled grass, or maybe I have. I don't know. I've been in the city for too long. I haven't been around greenery.
Like I haven't touched grass, I haven't smelt grass, I haven't been near it at all.
Oh gosh.
But I thought the other really interesting aspect of this is their model in general. Like it's cool that it's not just like, oh, hey, here's some better for you products, like figure it out. It's like, no, like send us your actual soil and we'll give you this plan and we're going to help you do it because there just isn't that much research. I mean, not research isn't the right word, but if I wanted to start taking care of my lawn, it'd be hard for me to figure it out, and not just figure it out in general, but hard for me to figure it out for my specific lawn conditions. So I think what they're doing is really cool. And the expansion into retail is like, that's also like not the typical D2C to store story.
No, I know. It's so interesting to see the DTC brands that have survived the D2C bust these past few years. But also having a soil database, I feel like that should be in a museum or something, like the Museum of Soil.
Oh my God, I know.
And I'm also, thoughts are scattered, but I'm like, you go outside, you put your soil in a cup, and then you send it. Are there no regulations in terms of sending soil across state lines? Or did he...
Yeah, state lines I think is fine. It's just you can't do it over the border, which I think is probably why when we asked him about like, would they expand internationally, that would be hard.
He was like, I do not want to deal with European regulation when it comes to soil.
No, but it's also like you can't like take anything like that in and out of the border. Like if they were set up in like the UK, they would like have to open like a whole place to test the soil over there. I've watched a lot of I don't think they run it anymore, but those like border patrol shows. And I mainly found them interesting because of like the food and agriculture laws and the counterfeit laws too. But like people getting stopped and being like, you can't bring this one piece of fruit in because it has this kind of dirt on it and it could ruin the entire ecosystem of Hawaii. And you're just like, geez, all right. Like they're really strict about that kind of stuff. But I like state lines, I don't think matter.
Oh, well, it's so funny. Like you're literally going to ruin our life if you bring this tomato in.
Like literally.
Oh my gosh, the power of fruit. What do you think that the success of this company says about the DTC brands that have been able to last?
Well, I think the thing that's, I don't want to say this in a way that's negative about other D2C companies, but the ones that last seem to be the products that are like actually innovative, that are like actually better, like replacing, like being a better option. Like I think about like the Dollar Shave Club and what happened to them. And it's like, well, in theory, they were just selling the same razors you could buy at the store pretty much and just like doing it in an online model. Whereas here it's like the online subscriptions, you get a lot out of it. Like they give you a personalized plan essentially for your lawn and you buy the products. And it's like you would have reason to go back every year because like your lawn's still going to be there. But at the same time, the products are so good that they were able to expand into retail because like retail asked them to, which is like not generally what you hear from D2C brands. It's like it's harder to go from D2C to retail, but having the stores reach out directly is
I know.
obviously a much easier path.
I know. I really like this, or I guess as I get older, I really like seeing all this innovation kind of grow with me in a sense, or it's like maybe like 10, 20 years ago, as if I wasn't like 4. But like I imagine 20 years ago, you couldn't just have like a lawn care subscription service like this.
No.
And now just as I'm approaching home ownership with these interest rates, I don't know. But like now that I'm getting older, it's like, oh yeah, well now I have access to a lawn subscription service. It's kind of like we're growing up with this new wave of innovation. There's going to be a bunch of kids who won't even remember like back in the day, we did not have lawn care subscription services. And you know what else is really thinking about growing up with this stuff? Because I was thinking about the branding of Sunday and how it's like really aesthetically chic for a lawn care company.
It really is.
I was like, this is so kind of millennial aesthetic. They know their audience and them going to, the Lowe's aisle. If I'm there and I see them versus another organic brand, of course I'm going to pick the cute bottle. And so
for
I was
sure,
like, this is tailor-made innovation.
No, it's like I love all that kind of stuff because it's like it's better for you and it's not going to be in some like earthy crunchy brown bag at the end. Like they're like, no, we're cute, look at us, and we're better, so you should buy us. And it's like, oh, I get why they started D2C, obviously because of how the model works, but it feels very made for retail.
It does, right?
In a way that I don't know, maybe other D2C companies don't.
Next, there should be like fragrance lawn care or something. Like, oh, you could spray tomato pesticide or something. Not tomato. What's the scent? Lavender pesticide or something to make it, even cuter.
Oh, you don't love the smell of fresh cut grass?
I don't remember the smell.
I will say though, like the one thing I wish we had talked about with him that we didn't get to is just the concept of like lawns in general. Like I know that obviously having better products to put on your lawn is a great step, but like for the majority of people based on where they live, like having a lawn is just like not environmentally sustainable in general. Like a lot of people live places where grass is not native, or the type of grass you'd have in a lawn is not native. And so it's like, I wish we had asked him about that, because of course, like it'd be great if everyone did the correct environmental thing to the max, but this is America. People don't do that. So it's like, I guess it's better to have better products for the people like in the meantime.
Wait, okay. So now that's going down a whole other rabbit hole that we can't get down, because now I'm really interested about Big Lawn and
Big Lawn.
Now I'm going to do a deep dive after that. Why do we have lawns? That's the philosophical question.
I love grass as much as the next person, laying on grass, doing a picnic, doing anything like that. But like, you are the perfect example. Like, you are from Florida, the majority of Florida. Like, there's just not native lush green lawns. Like, they're manufacturing that.
Manufactured Big Lawn.
Ugh.
Another one.
Found is hosted by myself, TechCrunch senior reporter Becca Skutak, alongside senior reporter Dominic Midori Davis. Found is produced by Maggie Stamets with editing by Kel. Our illustrator is Bryce Durbin. Found's audience development and social media is managed by Morgan Little, Alyssa Stringer, and Natalie Kreisman. TechCrunch's audio products are managed by Henry Pickavet. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back next week.